in this new method of obtaining and hearing public input, which is through the web, through a webinar hearing. So we will be interested in your experience and your evaluation and feedback for this method to be able to ascertain your questions and your input. The purpose of this webinar is to gain information and understanding of the changes that will come to I405 in an express toll lane method of improving the management of congestion. We know that the congestion on I-5 is significant and bad and will probably worsen with the forecast of another 1 million people in the Puget Sound area. We know that we cannot build our way out of congestion and that utilizing an express toll lane is one method of managing congestion. We know that congestion is bad, but we have accommodated it, and we are looking forward to hearing from Craig Stone, who is the Assistant Secretary for the Tolling Division, assisted by Kim Henry, who is in charge of the I405 plan, to answer our questions and your questions and to provide more information about the proposed changes to I405 to accommodate express toll lanes. Craig, would you proceed with your proposal, with your proposed rate-setting presentation?
Good evening to the commissioners, and good evening to those who are participating with us tonight. And myself and Rima Griffith will be going through a presentation, and it starts off with an overview here. I don't know if I get the page to change. Okay. I think we're switching over the presentation so I can advance it. But what we want to talk about tonight is what the Commission is considering for the toll rates, and that we want to frame up with a little bit of project history and background. And then we want to talk about how toll lanes will be implemented, and then what are the policies that the Commission is taking under consideration here with input tonight and in the weeks to come. Okay, so there we go. So there's our agenda. And then continuing on with that, the Transportation Commission has been working with the Department of Transportation and beginning basically in the late in 2013 looking at 405 rate setting. We continue to possibilities of policies, including the idea of a minimum and maximum rates, the toll rates would be. And we'll talk more about how the computers will actually set the toll rates on the 405 based off of actual real-time traffic demand. Then March through November 2014, we worked with a tolling subcommittee, which is 3 members of the Transportation Commission, to look at these policy questions that have been reported out. And we are now at the place of bringing then information here. First, on February 3rd, there was a meeting in Bellevue. Tonight, we're here with the virtual public input meeting. And then on Thursday night, we'll be up at the city of Kirkland. And the commission schedule at this point will be able to have a final public hearing in Kirkland on March 18th. So looking at the project context and background, I think it's real important. There is definitely a history to Interstate 405. And the question is, what brings us to here tonight? If you look at 405, not too many people will argue that it has one of the worst commutes in the state. From the standpoint of traffic, we experience some of the worst traffic in the state, up to 8 hours of congestion a day. And we define congestion effectively from 45 miles an hour or less than that. By 2030, this corridor from Linwood area all the way down into the Renton area will have employment growth of 50%, and we'll see 25% more residents. But not only are the regular traffic lanes not performing, the HOV lanes that were built on Interstate 405 as they're operating at 2+ are also not meeting our state and federal standards. They too are dropping below 45 miles an hour, and we have a standard that says 45 miles an hour 90% of the time. And so what happens is those HOV lanes sometimes are just as congested as the regular lanes. In fact, there's some people who have noted that bus drivers will move into the regular lanes at times because the HOV lane is not working for them. So with that, transit suffers. They have longer headways. Those taking transit as an alternative do not have the reliability, and that increases also their costs. One of the areas that we wanted to look at is the data from 405. This chart shows you in 2013, effectively in the Linwood to Bellevue, the southbound direction, as well as the Bellevue to Linwood, the northbound direction, during the peak periods that you can see effectively 90% of the time, or 9 out of every 10 days, the regular lanes are congested. Also, the HOV lanes, 60% of the time, or 6 out of every 10 days, are also congested, meaning we're not meeting performance standards. And you can see it's directional from the standpoint of the Linwood to Bellevue in the morning and the afternoon, but also Bellevue to Linwood really only in the evening hours. So they're very much a peak issue, but what we have is we're not be able to meet the reliability in the corridor. One of the things that Commissioner Haley noted, we have, all of us, the challenge before us, which is we have 7 million people now in the state of Washington. It continues to grow, and in fact, the last 10 years, we've added the city of Spokane to the Central Puget Sound region, and the next 20 years, we will add a city of Portland to this region. So the challenge is before us, how do we meet this travel demand today, let alone in the future, in the years to come? With that, the Department of Transportation, as well as the chair of the Transportation Commission at the time, embarked in 1999 on a effort to look at how do we come up with a vision, how do we come up with a master plan that really looks at the whole Interstate 405 corridor. And so with that, we worked with the committees, included exec committees of elected officials up and down the corridors, from the cities, from the counties, from the regions. We worked with a technical committee, and also we worked with a citizens committee. And through that, they came to a record decision, which is something that the environmental impact statement completes, and that developed a master plan in 2002. From that, we've been building off of that, and there are 4 studies that I've referenced here that we worked with an executive advisory group to refine the concept of what an express toll lane could be in the corridor. That then led in 2011 to the legislature authorizing express toll lanes for the Bellevue to Linwood section. Also at that time, the State Transportation Commission here also did an independent review of the express toll lanes. And that is what has brought us to today. If you go back to the master plan that was adopted in 2002, it really went from Linwood down through the Tukwila-Renton area. It looked from Lake Sammamish to Lake Washington. It looked at the highway. It looked at transit. It looked at arterials. And what the result was a balanced approach of adding 2 additional lanes in each direction for 405 throughout its 30-mile length. Then also having a rubber-tire transit system called a bus rapid transit system that would have transit flyer stops, park and rides, that would be in place. We also would have a concept here of direct access ramps for those HOV vehicles to get on and off. 2 of those you see today, one in Bellevue and one up in Kirkland area. It also talked to a potential managed lane system, and this is what was referred to back in 2002 that has become the express lane concept. Included then park and ride spaces, as well as a very extensive van pool program and environmental enhancements. What's important to note here, during this process with that executive committee, the technical committee, as well as the citizens committee, we looked at a whole host of concepts. Some of them included light rail, to be how light rail would work on the east side. We looked at the Burlington Northern Santa Fe corridor, and could diesel locomotive units be used up and down that corridor. On the other bookend of transportation choices, we looked at freeway, and we even ran an unconstrained freeway concept that looked up to adding 10 more lanes to that facility. And even with that, you cannot build your way out of congestion. What we found was traffic from I-5 started diverting to 405, transit from 99 started diverting over to I-5, the local arterials then were relieved coming to 405. And what we found is the demand is so great from the population employment that it became challenging to even being able to build it. So the recommendations came to be was a balanced approach that you see here. With that, the Washington State Legislature then in 2003 and 2005 funded projects across the state of Washington, which included 13 projects in this corridor. And it's a pleasure to say that each of these projects are almost all complete. They've been delivered under budget. There are two that, if you see the check marks, have not been complete. One is what we're speaking about tonight, which is the Bellevue to Linwood Express toll lane. And the other one is in the very south end of the corridor, down the 167 between Auburn and Pierce County line. Once these are completed, there is no more funding for improvements on this corridor without an additional funding source from the legislature. Within the concept of the master plan, then, is this express toll lane concept, as I mentioned before, which we referred to in 2002 as the managed lanes. This is the concept that we have in place, which is to have express toll lanes from Linwood to Bellevue, Bellevue to Renton, and Renton down into Pierce County on that corridor. Some people call this the East Side Corridor. Is the only alternate to Interstate 5 that we have in this region, given our topography. The benefits of having an express toll lane concept here is providing reliability. What we experience today is you have no reliability to get from point A to point B. For a 17-mile trip from Linwood down to Bellevue, if you're doing the speed limit, that should take you about 17 minutes. On average, it can take you over 40 minutes, and some days it can take you up to 69 minutes. So it's very difficult to plan your trip. We also found with express toll lanes that you actually can move more people and more vehicles throughout the entire freeway corridor, not only in the express toll lanes, but even in the regular lanes. We saw that you improved transit speed and reliability, and it gave an opportunity or a choice for people to get around congestion for those very important trips. Also with this, which we'll speak to, the rates that we'll be using that we'll set for these express toll lanes will be dynamic, meaning they will be based off of real-time traffic every 5 minutes, and they'll be adjusted to make sure we're optimizing the throughput of the corridor. Any funds generated from tolling are set aside by the legislature into the state treasury and for 405 only. So they would be reappropriated for reinvestment in the future for more 405 improvements. These supplement the gas tax revenues that have been used to build 405, and this is a supply and demand market-based direct user fee. So if you do not use it, you will not pay that fee. Breaking down that 40-mile corridor, what you can see here on the left-hand side is our first phase of that. So for those who know the area between Renton and Auburn, we have the hot lanes that was started in 2008. Then later this year, in 2015, we will open up the Bellevue to Linwood Express toll lane concept. Phase 2, which is unfunded, then would fill in the Renton to Bellevue area, including the picture you can see there, which is a flyover from the hot lanes of 167 into the express toll lanes of 405 that then creates the 40-mile system. And you will note as we speak, while we're talking about the Bellevue to Linwood, we are looking at this as a concept of a 40-mile system that will work together in an ultimate configuration. Then if we look at that section from Bellevue to Linwood, what we're doing is we're seeing construction that's out right now. Flatiron Constructors is actually working on this. They are nearing completion, and again, this fall should be complete with their work. It will add capacity between Bellevue and Bothell. You can see an additional lane being built and added there. There are noise walls. There is a braided ramp, meaning instead of weaving, one ramp will go over the other up at the 160th towards 522 up in the Woodinville area. And with this, then this improvement, then also we'll have the tolling components that I'll speak about later. You also will note in here there are zones that we will talk about, and so there will be 3 price zones as we get into the pricing. Zone A from Linwood to the Bothell area, Zone B from Bothell down to Kirkland, and then Zone C from Kirkland down to Bellevue. As I mentioned before, we've worked extensively with an executive committee. You can see on the right-hand side in 2013 who made up that executive committee, the different mayors and council members from the cities, the different regional, local, and federal agencies, the counties, and we've also invited state legislators who have participated with us. Two key highlights from that, they dealt with a question of, if you're going to have express toll lanes out here, you're going to start off with the HOV lanes that are already there. You'll be adding an additional lane in that Bellevue to Bothell section. What do you do with the carpools in that situation? What we found through our modeling is while the 2+ carpools have worked well in the past years up and down the corridor, as I mentioned earlier, our HOV lanes are breaking down. So they looked at different options of how do we transition into going forward in the future, realizing there is going to be a point in time where we have to have 3+ carpools during the peak periods, and then they considered then during the off-peak periods, then staying with 2+. We highlighted for them situations around the country, which I will speak to a little bit later, where other agencies have gone to 3+ 24 hours a day. Others have done just during the peak periods. But what we're finding is to get the guaranteed trip reliability, that step is needed. I'd then like to talk about the toll lane implementation steps, more about how you will drive it and what you will see on the roadway. The toll rates, as I mentioned, are based on demand. As more traffic demand is there, pricing goes up. As the traffic demand reduces, pricing goes down. It's not unlike, actually, I heard today a radio story on parking from the standpoint, when parking demand is up closer to the city, pricing is higher. When you're further away or you're in a smaller city away from the big cities, the parking pricing is down. It is a pure supply and demand concept. Our goal is to keep the lanes always at 45 miles an hour or faster, and the display overhead will then show you to a destination what that price is. You will pay that price upon your entry, even if during the trip you'll see later that a price has gone up. That is for the other additional people who will be entering in later. Transit, van pools, motorcycles, and carpools will then be free. We're then using the ways you pay for Good to Go. So when you use the Good to Go program for crossing 520 or across Highway 16 Tacoma Narrows Bridge or on the 167 hot lanes, you can use your Good to Go pass to pay that lowest rate. You also have the opportunity to use what we call Good to Go pay by plate. There is a short-term account way you can pay, and then also if you do not have a Good to Go account, you can still use those lanes by just driving in them at a higher pay by mail rate, of which then we look at your license plate number, look up the registered owner with Department of Licensing, and then just send a bill to you in the mail, which you then have to pay just like a utility bill. How the express toll lanes will work, this is a graphical map of that area between Bellevue and Linwood. As I mentioned, there will be one express toll lane between I-5 up in Linwood and 522. That will be that existing HOV lane that will be turned over to an express toll lane, but we are not adding any lanes in that section. Between Bothell at State Route 522 and downtown Bellevue, Northeast 6, we have the existing HOV lane, and into the inside of that, both the north and southbound direction, we are adding a lane. And so that's depicted with the lines on the graphic. There will be dedicated entry and exit points both at the beginning and at midpoints through here, and you can see in green where they're shown. There will also be direct access ramps that I mentioned earlier, one in downtown Bellevue and one in the Totem Lake area of Kirkland that you'll be able to use by using the express toll lanes. Because we are allowing the express toll lanes to be used with the Good to Go pass as well as pay by mail, where we look at your license plate and send you a bill in the mail, we have to have you declare that you are a carpooler, and we will be doing that with a flex pass. There's pictures down below here that shows the flex pass. It has two modes. One is in the HOV mode when you are satisfying the carpool requirement at that time, or if you're not, then in the toll mode. We will be switching these out for everybody who's purchased the switchable passes on 167, and so we'll have a program for that. These are the same type of transponders or passes, that are being used in Colorado and other places around the country where there are switchable passes. One of the principles of express toll lanes comes from traffic flow and traffic principles. This is actually a chart derived from Interstate 405 itself. Each dot is a period of time where the number of vehicles moved through a particular area by what the speed was. And you can see in the very top left area, in the green area, you could be running 60 miles an hour with a very small number of vehicles on the roadway. That could be at 2 o'clock in the morning. You then continue, as traffic continues to build towards the right, you'll see in that green area, traffic stays around 60 miles an hour. But as you start getting up around 16 to 1,800 vehicles per hour, and this is true not only here in Washington State, this is true around the country, human dynamics are you start to hesitate, you start to slow down and be cautious. And so what happens right around that 50 miles an hour to 45 miles an hour, there's a sweet spot that gives you the most throughput of vehicles per hour at its best speed. What happens after that? We know what happens after that. There'll be a shock wave, somebody will step on their brakes, somebody else will slow down, and all of a sudden the traffic then breaks down. Once it breaks down, it quickly goes down into the lower part of this chart, and we can then be in stop-and-go traffic, and it can take a long time to recover from that. So once you get into that unstable flow, you really have lost productivity of that facility. So this is a really important principle, and it's been proven out throughout the country and the world about human dynamics. And it's very much different than water flowing through a channel because of that human perspective. Well, why is that important? If you look at productivity of our freeway and look at productivity of each square foot of pavement that we have out there, and you want to get to that 45 to 50 mile an hour optimum performance, what we're seeing right now on 405 on the top chart is up around 160th Street, up there by the Woodinville-Bothell area. We're probably peak right now, showing 2013, getting about 80% productivity out of that lane, meaning we're losing the ability to move vehicles through because of congestion. If you look at the southbound direction, you can see we're down to 60% productivity. And in fact, there's places on 405 where we have 50% productivity. So in effect, when you need it the most, there's the most demand on that facility, we perform the worst. And so effectively, it's like cutting the number of lanes in half. And that's the dynamic that we're dealing with here with traffic and traffic flow. And if you can keep that at an optimum, you're basically getting the most productivity you can out of the assets that we have out there on the facility. Looking nationally, this is an interesting chart. This shows all the counties across the country. Half the population of the U.S. lives in these 146 counties, these blue counties shown here. The principle here is we have some very dense urban areas of our country, and then we have around that are part of our nation. But the approach to urban congestion really needs to be thoughtfully done, and what we're seeing is express toll lanes as part of that solution set in the last 10 to 20 years. And in fact, 405, by the time it comes on, will be the 33rd express toll lane being implemented in this country. So we're looking at lessons learned from California, from Texas, from Florida, from Minnesota, from Washington, D.C. area, as you can see around. And there's two that I'd like to point out to you that I think are of interest. The first one is Miami. On Interstate 95, they took an interstate and they did exactly what we're doing on 405. They added an additional lane, so they took a single HOV lane and made it into 2 express toll lanes. They didn't change the general purpose regular lanes, but what's interesting what this chart is trying to show is the express toll lanes tripled in speed and performance once they implemented the express toll lanes there in Miami. And actually what happened, because they were operating more efficiently, the regular lanes then doubled in speeds because they had less demand on them. And what's interesting with Interstate 95 here, they're actually extending it up to Fort Lauderdale area because it's been successful. The other example we have is San Diego. So on Interstate 15 coming out of San Diego, they had some HOV lanes in place. They converted them to be express toll lanes. What this chart shows is the public supported the Interstate 5 after they implemented it and after they got experience using it. What we show in orange is what we call the East Side Corridor. So that is the I405 167 corridor. 2009, we did a public survey about people who would approve and support the concept of express tolling, those who would oppose, and those who were undecided. Effectively, it's about a third each going across. But if you compare that to the blue area on San Diego, you can see where they started prior to implementation, around 25% support. Then they had the opposed, and then a large number of people were undecided. They hadn't used it yet. Once they got I-15 up and going as express tolling in phase 1, 2 years later, what they saw was a lot of the undecided moved over to the approved area, somewhat to the opposed area, but that 25% support went up to about 54% support. They came back in 2002, did a further survey, and what they found is not only people using express tollings, people using the HOVs in the express tollings, and even the regular drivers saying they like the choice, they found that their support is now up around 65%. So what we find is people, once they get used to driving it, and we've seen this on 167, then they're saying, yes, we like the product. And I've seen a number of comments we received on 167 hot lanes that people live in Sumner and say they work in Bellevue. They use the 167 hot lane and say, when are we going to extend this up to 405? So with that concept, what I'd like to do now with Rima Griffith is start talking about the toll rate proposal. Before I do that, I wanted to talk about responsibilities that's shared in state government. The Washington State Legislature establishes tolling on facilities. So they have voted bills to put express tollings on 405, as I mentioned, as well as on State Route 520 or Tacoma Narrows Bridge. They designate specifically by a bill to actually move forward with that. The Transportation Commission, which is here tonight, their responsibility is to set those toll rates, the policies associated with them, the exemptions, any fees associated with that. And then the Department of Transportation, which I represent, then plans, we analyze, we actually construct the facilities, we then collect the tolls, and we operate those systems into the future. Okay? So the proposal components tonight deal with the minimum toll rate, the maximum toll rate, the pay-by-mail toll increment, any exemptions, and what the carpool policies are so these express tollings are operating efficiently. I'll start then with the minimum rate, and as I mentioned earlier, there will be a computer algorithm that will actually set the toll rates every 5 minutes. It needs to know what the minimum will be. It needs to know what the maximum will be that it needs to work within. So the Commission will need to set the minimum toll rate for 405 express tollings. Modeling is showing the average toll will be between 75 cents and $4 on typical days. And we've also seen that the minimum toll rate will have a significant contribution to the revenue because that's kind of your base that we are building from.
And this is Rima Griffith. I'm with the Transportation Commission, and the Commission is proposing a 75-cent minimum good-to-go toll rate. This will represent about, we anticipate 77% of the trips are anticipated to be below $1. We view a lower minimum toll will reduce the barrier to entry, and it's consistent with the average collection and enforcement costs that are expected at 70 cents. So with that, yeah.
So the maximum toll rate, then, as I mentioned, the Commission needs to set a maximum, of which then the algorithm and the computer is setting up the upper levels here. There is variability in how you set that rate. As we mentioned, the typical between 75 cents and $4. There are going to be some days where, on very unique situations, it could go between that $4 and $10 range. What we've shown here is a chart, and each of these dots is actually a 15-minute period throughout the year. So you're seeing what traffic is happening on Interstate 405 in the area of Bothell in the southbound direction. The black line shows you what the average volumes are at that particular time. Actually, it'd be speeds. And so what you see then is that around 70 miles an hour, then you drop down to around 30 miles an hour in the morning peak. You come back up in the midday. You have a little bit of a dip there in the evening. But yet, congestion, as we all know, can vary quite a bit, whether it's weather, whether it's day of the week, what the situation is. So effectively, 10% of the time, you'll be in that red area where 1 out of every 10 days, you might be able to get down into that area. And you can see then on those days, you may, for periods of time, get in that $4 to $10 range with that.
So on the maximum toll rate, the Commission is recommending $10. This would allow for congestion management on all but the extremely congested days. And according to the planned DOT operational policy, when that maximum toll rate is reached, the system will remain at the maximum rate instead of switching to HOV only, which people would see on SR 167 currently. And this will allow customers to continue to have access to that lane when it's most needed. The Department and the Commission will monitor the performance, and of course, if it's warranted in the future, this maximum rate could be adjusted.
Okay. The next part is if you do not have a good-to-go account, you can still use the express toll lanes by driving into them. So just like on Tacoma Narrows Bridge or on State Route 520, if you go across the bridge, we will look at your license plate. We will look up department licensing, or if you're out of state, we will look up through other Department of Motor Vehicles the registered owner, and then we will send them an invoice, of which then they pay like a utility bill. There is a cost to doing that business, such as mailing, lookups, things of that nature. So the Commission is considering setting a differential toll pay-by-mail rate. They do that on Tacoma Narrows Bridge and 520 at this time. And that increment then would be added to that good-to-go toll rate that you see. There will be signs on the side of the road that will tell you there's an added increment for that. It, again, will cover these incremental costs and some losses. There are times you cannot read a particular license plate, even though we do a pretty good job of it. So there are a couple times that you have some losses. And then, again, as I mentioned, the signs would tell the customers when those charges apply.
So the Commission's proposal on this is that the pay-by-mail increment be $2. Be consistent with the SR 16 Tacoma Narrows Bridge pay-by-mail increment, and long-term, the Commission will be making this fee consistent across all toll facilities.
Okay. The next area is exemptions. These are people who might be exempt from a toll for different reasons. So there's a proposal right there.
The exemptions are being proposed to be exempt from the tolls that are in the express toll lanes. It would be transit buses and van pool occupancy vehicles, meaning carpools, motorcycles, and private buses with 16 or more seats. Washington State Patrol vehicles providing service to the tolling facility, authorized emergency vehicles on a bona fide emergency, so they're responding to an emergency call. Department maintenance vehicles directly involved in the roadway maintenance of the express toll lanes, and tow trucks that are authorized by Washington State Patrol that are responding to clear a blocking vehicle from the tolled facility.
Okay. Then the carpool occupancy is part of that. The question then is, the Executive Advisory Group recommended, they recommended that 3+ carpools during the peak periods would be exempt from tolls, but then to use 2+ carpools is exempt during all other times. Some of the Executive Advisory Group members stressed that this should be an interim measure, assuming that eventually we'd want to go to a 3+ carpool definition at some point in the future. I think I mentioned earlier, but there are cities such as Miami and Atlanta that have gone to 3+ 24 hours a day, and so we studied those. And so we're at the place of looking at these choices. The choices could be run at 3+ throughout the day and evening, 3+ peak, 2+ off-peak, meaning a period of time we're running at 3+, 2+, or leave it at 2+ toll exemptions throughout the day. Another concept was doing a discount, such as maybe a 50-cent or $1 discount for 2+, off of what the price would be that the good-to-go regular customers are using. Or other concepts were no carpool exemptions at all. Effectively, everybody pays. Considerations are we have a performance and revenue requirements that are set out in statute. The legislature has been very specific from the standpoint that they do call for 45 miles an hour 90% of the time. They do call for that revenue will exceed our operating expenses for this. So those are objectives that we have. The carpools will need an account and to be able to have a flex pass to qualify for that exemption. There is a complexity of messaging and educating and public acceptance that are taken into consideration here. And then there's a consideration as when do you transition to 3+ in the future, and when would that be, and is it truly needed? This chart is built off of that same type of a concept of looking at travel speeds in 15-minute increments across the year. This, again, is southbound in 405 area. That red line is the 45 miles an hour performance standard we have, and again, it's based off that concept of getting the maximum throughput in a lane. And what we're seeing here from those dots, as well as up in the right-hand corner, that our 2+ HOV lanes is degrading, and there are more than 200 days in a year where we're below 45 miles an hour. 405 is not unique in this situation. I-5 is breaking down also. One of the challenges, obviously, with the 2+ is it's been so successful, we are not able to provide the operational improvements that we need to. It is interesting that I-5 was actually constructed to be 3+ and with the 2+ as a period of time. And our future plans are say you probably need to get back to 3+. Express toll lanes gives you that ability to be able to make sure you're optimizing the throughput, and that's what we've seen around the country. So there is definitely a challenge of staying with 2+ because we would not be able to guarantee 45 miles an hour even under existing conditions, let alone the future years to come. We also looked at then net revenue. Net revenue means what is the actual total revenue coming in through the tolls that were collected. Again, they're collected for just 405 against what are the operating expenses to operate and maintain that facility. We looked at different scenarios. We called them A through E. This is a fairly dense chart here, but the red circles show you effectively we would be losing money under those concepts there in the year 2017. And then the green circles are showing what we think the net revenue would be in the year 2017. Scenario C has been one that we looked at, the idea of 2+ in the off-peak, as well as then 3+ during the peak with what we call photo tolling, which is that pay-by-mail concept.
So the Commission is making a proposal based on all this information that for the express tolling, 3+ HOV vehicles be exempt during peak periods and 2+ HOV vehicles be exempt all other times of the day. This would be consistent with the recommendation made by the Executive Advisory Committee. It is needed in peak periods. Clearly, the data that Craig just walked through indicates we have a failure, and in order to ask people to consider purchasing a trip, we have to ensure that kind of service is met. The 2+ during peak periods does not meet our federal performance requirements, nor does it provide sufficient revenue to cover our operating costs. The 2+ during midday minimizes the impact of the existing car pools while making better use of the express tolling capacity. And the 2+, 3+ approach that we're proposing provides a transition period until such time that 3+ is really needed 24/7. We feel at this time it provides a nice split between giving that peak period relief but allowing the 2+ car pools to still have access during the rest of the day.
So with a 3+ peak period proposal, then you need to define what the peak periods would be. So defining them, the Department of Transportation traffic engineers, we reviewed then the different factors that would come into this. So there is this timing of changing when you go from 2+ to 3+, and then when you change back from 3+ to 2+ as you come out of the peak periods. We want to avoid any abrupt changes in traffic performance, and we also want to avoid any abrupt changes in the toll rates during that transition period. The peak period should apply to the corridor wide in both directions, so it's clear and understandable to the public who is driving this on a day-to-day basis. The peak periods need to consider transit usage and need to look at optimizing the total highway performance of all lanes up and down the corridor. The facility performance impacts, HOV volumes frequently exceed 800 vehicles per hour. They start changing in this weather performance at that point. General purpose lanes frequently drop below 55 miles an hour, as we mentioned earlier, and there are impacts on meeting revenue objectives. So consistency with 405 in the south end, which is currently running HOV between 5 a.m. to 7 p.m., and then between 7 p.m. and 5 a.m. it's open to all. That was the other factor in here. So these charts then show, the red lines show the HOV volumes. Not too surprising, HOV volumes really peak during the peak periods as the general purpose traffic degrades. So the green lines then show what happens to that general purpose speeds as they're dropping down. And what we're looking at in the area blue would be those times of the day that we would be at 3+, and then the white areas are the times that we'd be at 2+. And you can see effectively how these lines cross and how the performance is set. And so with that, 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. in the morning and 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. were the areas shown in the blue here. The key here, obviously, in constraint is in that Bothell area between Bothell and Linwood, where you have that single HOV lane. That will be the controlling area for us for the 3+ controls in performance. It'll also be the controlling area for looking at the duration of these peak periods. So if the peak period is defined too tightly, the high volumes of toll-free traffic may reduce express tolling reliability and revenue, so it may not be there when you need to be there. So if you're guaranteeing yourself that, hey, I have a choice to get to that appointment, to get to child care, get to the airport, I need it, and if it's defined too tightly, you may not be able to get there. If peak period is defined too broadly, general purpose congestion could persist longer than we want on the general purpose lanes, and we want to make sure we find the right balance with that.
So with that, the proposal of the Commission is that peak periods be set from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. This is made consistent with the Department's traffic engineering data analysis on the corridor, and it's consistent with traffic trends as well as with the HOV hours of operation.
And our last slide then is a summary.
So we have a proposal of a minimum toll rate of 75 cents, a maximum toll rate of $10, a pay-by-mill additional toll increment of $2. Exemptions would be provided to transit, van pools, HOVs, including carpools, motorcycles, and 16-passenger buses, and in-service emergency vehicles, maintenance vehicles, enforcement, and incident management vehicles, including private tow trucks. And the carpool policy being proposed is that 3+ carpools are exempt at all times of the day. 2+ carpools would be exempt except during those peak hours of 5 to 9 a.m. and 3 to 7 p.m. on weekdays.
And with that, I believe we turn it back over to our moderator.
Thank you, Craig and Rima, for that informative presentation. Now, before we move to the question and comment portion of this presentation, we'd like to ask the participants if they would mind taking a quick survey for us. I'll pull up the survey. The survey should take roughly 2 minutes, and then we'll reconvene for questions and comments. For those of you on your tablets, you might need to look to the right-hand scroll bar to get through all the questions. There's 5 questions in total. survey. We want to get So I'm going to end the voting now and close the survey. Thank you everyone for your time, and we'll move to our question and answer portion of the presentation. I'll quickly share the results. Unfortunately, for those of you that are on an iPad, tablet, or smartphone, you may not be able to see the results, but they will be displayed at a later date on our website. All right, we'll quickly read through the questions and we'll ask Craig Stone to respond. First question is the state going to guarantee that if we pay the tolls, the toll lanes will stay at 45 miles per hour? Who will monitor this? And if it does not meet that 45 miles per hour, will individuals get reimbursed?
So this is Craig Stone. Good question. We will monitor this throughout the period. We will be reporting out, I'm sure, the first day, the first week, the first month, and continuing, but it will be definitely monitored. 45 miles an hour, 90% of the time during the peak periods is the performance standard that we have, both at the state level by statute as well as the federal level. So that means there could be times, 10% of the times where it might dip below that standpoint. So that's what we're looking for performance from the system. The key then is to keep it always running. As far as reimbursement, it's an interesting question. I will say that no, there would not be necessarily reimbursement unless there was a major incident, State Patrol took over situation where we've had that on 520. It is interesting that in Atlanta that people still like the express toll lanes even for those periods of time where it's dipped below 45 miles an hour because they're still getting a better trip than they would have in the general purpose lanes as they work. But our goal, our performance goal measure is that 45 miles an hour 90% of the time.
Thank you. Our next question, why not reverse express lanes between Linwood and Bellevue?
So I think another interesting question, there are directional traffic. We've seen this in the past years. It's interesting in 405 that there is some directional traffic into Bellevue in the morning and out of Bellevue to the north in the afternoon. But yet, if you look at the presentation and some of the slides, I think at page 6, we're showing we have congestion southbound in both directions. I mean, we have it there. And so it is not as pure as you would think in the directional splits you have. Also, while those that laid out Interstate 5, and I think they were very forward-thinking to do reversible roadway, we all know right now that that reversible roadway in that off-peak direction is really, a lot of congestion with that. There's also some physical constraints getting through that Bothell Woodinville area in 522 to be able to put that into place. And so we're thinking about current operations as well as future operations with that. I do think, there are some concepts where we could look at that, and in fact, on 157, we've had some concepts of looking at that too as you get further out. But for the time being and looking at this, we think this is the best performance for the future.
How is going from 3 standard lanes to 2 going to help the commute?
So not sure I understand completely the question. So right now you have a single HOV lane that's out there, and you have basically in the north end 2 general purpose lanes to 3 general purpose lanes. What we'll be doing here is adding another express toll lane. So you'll have 2 express toll lanes in the south end and generally 3 general purpose lanes. So what we're doing is adding the express toll lanes that's out there to make them flow and as they go through this area. So that's how I'm looking at this at this point from the operations. But the north end, the Bothell, the Linwood, that's what you see out there right now is effectively what you're going to have. There will be a transit-only kind of shoulder peak period aspect, but the general purpose lanes will be 2, Bothell to Linwood, and one express toll lane.
So to be clear, Craig, that we are not going from 3 to 2 GP lanes then?
Yeah, I don't know.
Staying at 2 general purpose as it is, correct?
Well, Bothell to Linwood 2, and then south of there's 3.
It's like a drop.
General purpose lanes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Our next question is a 2-part. How would you provide reliability with toll lanes, especially when they're currently at their capacity?
Well, that's the key here. If you take our existing HOV lanes, as I mentioned, we started building them in the 80s. On I-5, they start off as 3+. We went to 2+. When 405 came along, we've added an HOV lane. We've operated them at 2+ for a number of years. They filled up, and so we're getting too much use out of them. What's happening is then we're breaking down, so transit, van pools, carpools are all losing reliability with that. The traditional way to meet our performance standard, 45 miles an hour, 9% of the time, is to go to 3+. The challenge with that is you can move out of that HOV lane almost half the traffic that's 2+, moving the general purpose lanes. They become more congestion. You look at the HOV lane, it looks empty, and you have a problem. So across the country, no one's been able to move to that, even though that's what our performance standard says you should be doing to provide reliability. Express toll lanes is the answer to that. It's not a solution that we could have had without technology, but now that technology is here, that we can toll people at the real time as they travel and have that demand management, we can basically allow 3+ HOVs to be in there. So giving priority to transit, giving priority to van pools, giving them the 3+ HOV to be in there, and then we can backfill in just enough that we're keeping that lane at that optimum 45 miles an hour. As it's optimized, then there's less pressure on the general purpose lanes, and then the whole corridor works. So it's really foundational in traffic flow principles. And the key to me is, again, across the country, we've seen about 30 of these operating. All of them are expanding, extending more going forward because they see the benefits of them.
Good. I think that's a good lead into this next question. Why not implementing 3+ now? Why are we waiting for the hot lanes?
That very reason. If you just did it dramatically now, I use a very technical term for that, so apologize. It's like managing with a 2x4. It is very blunt, and the challenge is you will have you have this issue of moving those 2+ over without having an option for them going forward.
Our next question has to do with the technology itself. So, can the system recognize if you're a single person or there's 2 people in your car or 3 person? Is it the honor system as the current HOV system works? What is the technology? How does that work?
So the State Patrol enforces our 300 miles of HOV lanes that we have currently in Snohomish and King and now into Pierce counties. They will continue to monitor the HOV lanes. 520 will be a 3+ HOV system when it opens up over to Seattle, so the State Patrol will be doing that. we will assist our State Patrol as they do then the occupancy count. So at every toll point location that you go under with a good-to-go pass and you have it in the flex mode, a beacon will go off and they'll be able to verify that, yes, indeed, you have a good-to-go flex pass. As I mentioned earlier, why do you need a good-to-go flex pass? Because we're offering opportunity for people to pay by plate, so using your license plate to be able to pay your toll, so we're consistent with the rest of the state system. So if you go across 520, you would pay with your license plate, and you go up 405. You have to tell us that you're a carpool at that point in time, so that's why we have a declarable pass. They are using the declarable passes in Los Angeles. They're using them in the Washington, D.C. area. They'll be using them in the Denver area. So the enforcement will be State Patrol with some assistance.
We have one question that speaks to the State Patrol and enforcement, that currently the State Patrol isn't doing enough enforcement on HOV lanes. Can you speak to what the State Patrol's plan will be with this new express toll lane approach?
Similar to how we opened the 167 hot lanes, the State Patrol will have emphasis patrols early, and then we will monitor it and adjust accordingly with that. It's a $124 ticket if you are in the HOV lane without proper occupancy with that. It's interesting, we do monitoring, and we've done monitoring through the University of Washington with our programs to look at our HOV. We actually have very good compliance. It may not seem like that at point, but we do have pretty good compliance here in the state already with that, and we will continue to monitor it. But when the startup, we'll be in the corridor, and first contacts will be informational. We know that people need to get used to it, so if somebody's in the HOV lane, they didn't have a tag, we will be working with them as customers, but over time, we will be enforcing the HOV requirements.
Great. We have a question about the presentation focusing upon the HOV lanes, but this question is in regards to the GP lanes, or the non-HOV lanes. What can you tell us about the chance of increased congestion in the GP lanes, or the non-HOV lanes, and also the surface streets?
Right. So express toll lanes are almost counterintuitive. A lot of people would think about when we tolled the 520 bridge, we saw people diverting away from it. We saw people going around the north end, around 522 to the Kenmore, Lake Forest Park area, some people going over I-90. Express toll lanes are actually trying to make the lanes you have out there as efficient as possible. In fact, instead of diversion, you actually see attraction. If you're making 405 more efficient, that means there's less pressure on the general purpose lanes. That means they operate better, which means for freight or people choosing to drive in it. And we've seen examples not only on 167 here that the general purpose lanes are operating better since we went to hot lanes. I mentioned the Miami example. There's other examples where the general purpose lanes are indeed operating better as they go with that. And so surface streets also, reason why the local cities up and down the corridor have been so interested and so good to work with is they are looking at 405 improvements to help with the arterial improvements. I mean, I live in the corridor. I know what it's like to drive in Lake Washington Boulevard or Cold Creek Parkway or things of that nature. Their point is if you can make 405 more efficient in all lanes, that means it's better for everybody.
Can you bring us up to date on the progress in creating a flex pass that will work for carpool exemptions in cars with metallicized windshields?
That's a good question. There are some vehicles that have metallized windshields. It's kind of for glare protection. There are some out there. They tend to be at different types. They're not the majority of vehicles out there. Some of them are higher end, but there are also some other Fords and Chevrolet type vehicles out there as options. If you talk to some of them, like Mercedes-Benz, they actually have a cutout area so that you can put a transponder pass in that place. So that allows you to have that option, be able to flex pass to do that. The second thing we're looking for is we're looking at a pilot program here. In Atlanta, what they do to declare you're an HOV, you go to a mobile app and you're able to say, I'm going to be an HOV, and in the next 15 minutes, get on that facility, and then when you drive through, we know who you are, and with your regular transponder that could be affixed to your license plate or something like that, of that nature. And so what we want to do is a pilot with those people who have that situation to give them that opportunity, and if we find that is successful, then we may open that up to others also.
Next question is, why apply in both directions? 405 north is empty to Bellevue, Linwood in the morning.
Well, we see congestion in both directions. So, 405 north, empty Bellevue to Linwood in the morning, that would be just in that particular direction at that particular time. So what we're dealing with here is we have both northbound, southbound, AM and PM situations. Again, on page 6, I think I looked at, we kind of show that you're right in that one particular direction. You will not have it. What that means is express toll lanes most likely will be operating very close to the minimum toll rate. So they may be down around that 75 cents during that time frame because there's less pressure. Again, express toll lanes are a supply and demand principle. There's more demand, the price will go up to make sure it's always operating. And if you're in the off-peak direction, just like on 167, it's very peaked to be northbound into Renton in the morning and southbound towards Auburn in the evening. The off-peak direction actually runs very low.
We have a question about when do we anticipate the hot lanes to become in effect and operational?
What we're looking at is fall of this year. There's still construction to be completed in the roadway out there. There are toll systems that you can see being put up right now. Some people have called us about the purple lights that they see. Those are called near-infrared lights that help us read your license plate. There's testing to be done. This spring, we'll start a marketing campaign, an education campaign. We will start selling the flexible passes so you can start using them at any time. But when 405 then opens up in the fall, there will be plenty of notice as we start.
Another question, if I pay the toll in the morning, am I all paid up for the day, or will I have to pay later on?
No, it'll be a per-trip charge. So if you're deciding to go the full 17 miles from Linwood to Bellevue as a single trip, then you'll pay for that. If you're just doing a short trip that would just go from Kirkland to Bellevue, you'd pay a less amount per trip, but it is a per trip, so it would not be for the full day.
Okay. Why not allow 2+ carpools if traffic is speeding or acceptable level?
Well, we'll be definitely monitoring that. We feel that there's enough evidence in the corridor that 2+ is not working now, and again, in that northerly portion, we're not adding lanes, so that same pressure will be there. And in fact, as we add more traffic down the lower lanes, that will put more pressure, at the upper lane. So we're feeling that this is a logical transition for the corridor that, in the end, will actually work best for all users.
Okay. We got about 3 questions on the cameras themselves. So how do the cameras work in those lanes?
Well, there's a whole setup that there's 21 toll points that are in the facility. So in both, for the total both directions, there will be signs that will tell you what the price is. As you go under that sign, enter the express toll lanes, there will be then what we call a gantry. It's overhead. It's very similar to what you see on 520 or on 167. There will be basically there's the triggers in the lanes that will say there's a vehicle there. They will count the number of axles because we actually charge for additional axles. There are then we read and we look to see if there's a good to go pass. If there's not a good to go pass, then what we do is we take pictures of your front and rear license plates, and then we match those up where the place you got in and the place that you exited so that we can then build a trip. And then if you have a good to go pass, we will then charge that against your good to go pass just as you do right now on any trip on our facilities. If you have just license plates, what we'll do is then send you an invoice about 7 to 10 days later, and then you'll have an opportunity to pay it again like a utility bill. If you don't pay that first bill, we will send you a reminder with a $5 reprocessing fee.
Okay. This next question is in regards to exemptions. So why not have some benefit for electric vehicles?
That's a good question. The governor's office has been advocating that, and so in their presentation this fall, they've talked about electric vehicles having exemptions or being able to have some type of a program to use toll facilities. We'll work with the governor's office on that. One of the concepts that he has put before the legislature is to put a fund out there that basically would say, on so many dollars per year for electric vehicles, and then you can use that to basically pay your tolls to a certain level. But that's yet to have worked its way through the legislative process.
We have a system config. Oh, Chairman.
Yeah, I'd make another comment upon that ultimately the question of exemption of electric vehicles resides with the Commission because it is the definition of an exemption for a particular toll. So that's rather than being a legislative responsibility, that's a responsibility that has been assigned to the Commission.
So we have a system configuration question here, Craig. If I understood correctly, there will be 2 HOV lanes between Bothell and Bellevue. So does this mean that the left general lane will be converted to HOV use?
Now, what you're seeing right now is the construction has been going on median of 405 for the last couple of years. So we're effectively working in that additional lane. So there'll be a new lane on the inside of that HOV lane. So what you'll see then will be 2 inside HOV lanes, which are now the express toll lanes. There'll be what we would call a buffer, roughly 4 foot. It will change. It will be striped, so it's very clear that you do not cross except for where there's entrance and exit points. And then there'll be the general purpose lanes to the right.
If there's a blocking incident or accident in the standard lanes, will you open up the toll lanes for traffic?
So that comes back to traffic management and having some standard operating procedures. If the State Patrol takes over the facility because of an incident, then we'll respond to their direction, which is what we do in our other facilities. If there is a situation on such as 167 where there may be a disabled vehicle or something that is off the shoulders providing some friction, effectively what we're doing is the price of the hot lanes will go up to accommodate the demand in there. So we can work on incident management. We'll have operating procedures depending on what the situation is at that time.
We have a federal funds tax question, so I don't know if this is going to be better for Kim or yourself, Craig, but I'm going to ask it. What federal tax funds do you receive for the carpool lanes on the 405, and how does this project impact those funds?
So Interstate 405 obviously has an interstate designation to it. It had federal funds that helped build the HOV lanes and do the improvements on the corridor in the past. Most of the work on 405 you've seen lately has been through state gas tax. There has been a little bit of federal dollars that's been associated with that. But because those HOV lanes were built with federal dollars, then federal restrictions apply to that. And so the federal government requires 45 miles an hour 9% of the time, and if you do not meet that in a 6-month period, you need to be able to make adjustments to that to prove that back. The tolls that will be collected will stay in the state's treasury subject to the legislature. So there is not a federal toll agreement needed on this. Actually, the federal government is now mainstream the idea of having express toll lanes because they've been proven out across the country. And so they then allow, if you're adding new capacity, which we are doing, or converting an HOV lane, which we're doing, that is something that's part of their program.
We also asked that question, and it did not make sense to us to have one express toll lane with the performance requirement and one not. Because the federal requirement was really only to one express toll lane. And so it made much more sense for both express toll lanes to be consistent. That measure then would be the federal requirement for both of them.
This is an interesting question, Craig, because many people have asked us this before. If carpool lanes are meant to reduce cars on the road, why do we include children in that count?
So there's a question of what a carpool is, and then you get into the definition of the trip. To us, the carpool is being formed to make a trip between A and B. We're not here to make a judgment as to was that a work trip, a family trip, to take a child to school trip. What we're really here is saying this is a way of designating moving people to the places that they need to go without putting value on particular trips that they might take.
Well, it seems too, it would be an enforcement difficulty to determine if there was an age limit applied. How was an officer to know if they're 12 or 16 or 18, or it gets into a very difficult situation to try to start differentiating by age.
Someone asked a question about the reserved bus lanes on southbound I405. Where are those located?
So there will be, and Kim can correct me on this one, southbound between 527 and 522.
195th, 522, and then going up the hill to 160th.
522 to 160th.
Okay, so is that loud enough for everybody here?
Would you mind repeating
Yeah,
it?
Kim Henry's here from the project office, who's director for that.
Southbound from 195th down to the 522 interchange, and then from 522 interchange to 160th. So it's to help that southbound direction.
We have a question here on, doesn't this split drivers into those who can afford to use the toll lanes and those who cannot?
I think the question of equity is very important with tolling. What we find is the express toll lanes is a choice. Most people, if not all people, do not use it every day. It's there when you need it. And from the standpoint of our 167 hot lanes that we put in place in 2008, we've been using that to learn a lot from. We've also done focus groups up and down the corridor, including low-income focus groups. It was very interesting to say that they really liked the opportunity to be able to use the express lanes when they needed to get there. There are times that individuals have jobs that they have to be there on the clock, or maybe they're in a job that they don't show up on time. They don't even get to work on the construction site for that day, so getting there on time was very important to them. Now, it's true they probably don't use it as much as maybe a higher income does. We also had the University of Washington look at equity question of tolling, and what they found is actually tolling, because it's a user fee, is more equitable than the traditional way we fund transportation, which is a gas tax, which means anybody traveling is paying that gas tax across the state, whether you're using that facility or not. And that is even more equitable than how we fund other transportation with the sales tax, which everybody uses. So it has a fairness component, absolutely. The question is trade-offs, and it's a choice to be able to use it at that particular time.
How much does it cost to implement this camera system, and who owns and maintains it?
So I'll look to the question on cost here and see if we can remember here, or we can get back to you on that. The camera systems are being installed by vendors. We will effectively, the Department of Transportation will own the equipment that's out there in the lanes. We will have our vendors maintaining that equipment, and they have performance standards to make sure that they are being responsive, because you're dealing with live traffic and managing traffic real time.
The contract is not split up between all the different components. I think the contract is for the entire detection system. And so cameras and the transponder detectors, I think were $12 million for the entire system for 17 miles.
Here's a question on clarity on the tolling. So if you don't have a pass, but one day you have 3 people in your car, will the camera know that you are HOV exempt, or do the users have to do something?
Exactly. That's one of the biggest changes in this program, is that people who are carpooling, you got 3 people in your car and you were going to go to Bellevue, you could just get in the HOV lane right now and use it. To get the toll exemption, you will need to have a good-to-go account and have a flex pass. We know that's a big change, and we've seen that around the country, and so that's where we're really focusing our effort into education, and we're going to work with people who carpool to give them good-to-go passes and the flex passes to get out there. Now, that said, the difference is right now, if you're out in that facility and you now get to use that lane no matter what time it is, what day it is, it's your choice to be able to use it. If you are 3 people in that car and you then have a license plate only, we will not know you're an HOV, and yes, we would charge you on that rate, but you're still getting that benefit of that trip at that time.
The next question is in regards to the algorithm of the express toll lanes. Is this ratio fixed for each toll zone? Is it independent? How does this algorithm work for each toll zone A, B, and C? So
from the standpoint, what we're doing is I'm not sure I'm going to follow the straight slope versus the sharp curve here, to be honest with you, so we could come back to that. We've set this up that it is monitoring traffic, it's monitoring speed in the express toll lanes, it can consider in the general purpose traffic to see how fast a change is happening. You'll be given, again, a price to your first destination, your second destination, and your third destination. It very well could be that that third destination has more congestion, that last zone, so it might have a higher ratio because of that going forward. Whereas the first two destinations, maybe you had a lower rate because you had less congestion in that particular area. So that will be monitored as we go through with this program.
Okay. A study released by King News states that making HOV lanes 2+ instead of 3+ has better traffic flow. What is the motivation behind the 3+? Higher revenue at the cost or not so good flow?
So yeah, we just saw King 5's news report. So there was actually 5 different reports that have been done on the express toll lanes that's worked through it. So there's been consultants who have national experience that the Department of Transportation has hired. We've worked through 4 different studies and looked at then these operations of 2+ and 3+, and describing these choke points or these critical places in the Boswell-Linwood area. There was an independent report that the legislature asked the Transportation Commission here to do, which is Cambridge Systematics, which is what King 5 referred to. They actually looked at the whole 40-mile corridor, not just this north end section through here. They also then said in the future it will give you better management, better flexibility. The challenge is that for that initial year you may be close if you had the whole 40 mile, but you still got these real critical places that will control the flow. The other part of it is even if you could say that 2+ could stay within that 45 miles an hour for a short period of time, there would be very little, if any, space to sell off to control the traffic flow, meaning for those who are paying, it would be a very high rate. Not necessarily say as a driver for this, but that is a consequence that came out of that study. The other part of it is the legislature gave us 2 charges. One was to make sure you're operating at 45 miles an hour 90% of the time, and the other one is by the end of year 2 to be operating in the black. So there is definitely the traffic performance. We've shown through these different studies we can move more vehicles, more people, more efficiently with this program and be able to manage our future challenges that we have in front of us. But there also is this matter of making sure that there is revenue that we can reinvest it back in the corridor. That's a secondary, but it is also part of the charge the legislature has given to us.
How much does the good-to-go pass cost, or the flex pass in this case? And then is there a minimum that needs to be going to the account to fund it? Right.
So right now you can set up a good-to-go account. It's $30 to put into that account, and then you draw it down as you use it. The pass, the sticker pass, the general pass you get is $5, and that would then be what you would need. If you want to have the flex pass, that flex pass will be retailed at $15. So you say, wow, that's $30 plus $15, that's $45 to get into this program. We will be working with incentives for people who already have a good-to-go account and a switchable pass, and working with people who carpool and working through commute trip reductions, employers, to try to incentivize the distribution of those passes.
Another configuration question. I see southbound entrance at 522. But no exit northbound. Does that mean I can't exit the HOV lane at 522 northbound?
I'm going to look at you guys quickly.
So there is a northbound exit. It's a little bit short of the Highway 522, and that's because of some interchange modifications up between 160th and 522, where we're creating a braided ramp to improve traffic flow through there, and we need to give people time to make that transition from the express toll lanes into that new ramp.
We have a question about reversing of a bad toll. Do you still allow one reversal for a bad toll as you have allowed on 167? I'm not sure.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we will, for the HOV, we know that there is a learning curve in education, and so yes, for HOVs, we will allow a reversal for those people, and we'll let them have an opportunity to learn about how to set up a good-to-go account or how the FlexPass will work, and so we'll have that opportunity. So if it's regarding that on 405, then yes, we will have that program.
Okay. We have a question on where you can get a copy of the presentation. We will be posting this presentation on the Commission website, which you will have at the conclusion of this presentation. We have a question on all the tradespeople on I405 drive two-seat only vehicles, vans or trucks, and cannot be 3+. Why are we punishing small businesses to create more revenue?
You know, that's actually an interesting question. There are a number of industry plumbers, some electricians on 167 who say, I can actually get more calls in because I can get there. I'm not congested. So actually, they found that the idea of paying for a toll has actually been beneficial to them. Again, they now have an opportunity to use the lane where if they were a single driver in trying to get to that next trip, they couldn't even get in the HOV lane without being a violator. So this actually opens up more people. I have a personal story of an electrician out of Puyallup who came to my home using Good to Go and said it was well worth his business.
How many general purpose lanes will there be?
So between Bellevue and Bothell, there will be 3 general purpose lanes, and between Bothell and Linwood, there will be the 2 general purpose lanes. So effectively what you see today.
And we did have a question on emissions. Are we taking emissions policies into our consideration?
Well, from the standpoint that anytime you have a facility operating more efficiently, you are better off from an air quality emission standpoint. That is a benefit of this. The other thing is you're looking at our primary goal here is to say, can we make sure those lanes are working? Can we make sure transit is working effectively? Can we make sure van pools are working effectively? Can we make sure car pools are getting the benefit? That is why we've invested for a number of decades into HOV lanes here. They actually have been working very well for us when we're moving number of people. Sometimes on 405, you have almost as many people in that HOV lanes you do in the general purpose lanes operating, even when they're not working as well. So it's part of our future to get the most we can out of it, give people choices, and then there are benefits to, to effectively the air quality component.
I might just add that as part of our environmental review of the project, we did study and take a look at that from a modeling perspective, and we certainly did find benefits from the improved efficiency of the roadway.
The congestion corridor report stated that the north end park and rides are all at 98 to 100% utilization. Is there a plan to increase capacity for park and rides in the near term?
I think that's a good question. It's obviously above and beyond this particular project here. If you speak back to the master plan, there were a number of facilities looking at how park and rides can be improved, how transit service can be improved, how flyer stops can be tied within to those park and rides going forward. This is a program that has multiple people and areas investing into it. There's been progress been made over the time here. But we also know park and rides are very popular from that standpoint.
Yeah, and we've made some really good progress with some of the park and rides, working with our partners, but we still believe we need to continue to make investments in that area to be consistent with the master plan that Craig talked about earlier on. And that's just something that's going to come over time.
There's a question on how the public can get more information on the financial results of this project.
Well, from the standpoint of all of our reports are on the Department of Transportation's website under the I405 project, and there's probably a library to history there that we can refer to. Then as far as the standpoint of how the facility is operating, we do quarterly financial statements on all of our toll facilities. We post them onto our website, And so you can go back and look at all of our quarterly and fiscal year reporting that we have for all of our facilities. When 405 gets up and operating, we'll be able to also generate that. We also know that at the beginning, there will be a lot of interest by the public. There'll be a lot of interest by policymakers. There'll be a lot of interest by the media. So the first day, the first week, first month, we will be tracking. We'll be having performance indications. We'll have a whole go-live plan that will be set, and we'll be able to report that. The key is going to be, we know there's a ramp-up period, and getting people used to using it, and as will happen, just like on 520, we knew that traffic would take about 6 months to stabilize, and also on 405, we expect that it'll probably be a 6-month period before things start stabilizing.
Great. I'm going to ask this question of Rima Griffith. A large number of commuters commute to Bellevue from Bothell. How come we don't have any meetings being held in Snohomish County?
Well, we tried to do that. We actually wanted to hold a meeting up in Linwood, but we're trying to keep our costs down, and so we do try to hold commission meetings and public meetings in city halls, so we don't have to rent recording equipment and so on and so forth. And we weren't able to get the Linwood City Hall. We looked at actually Bothell and a few other spots, and we just were unfortunately not able to secure facilities. So we did want to go to the north end of the corridor and definitely be up in that area. It just didn't work out this time.
Great. And I want to follow up with another question of what someone commented this is a Q&A type format, which is appropriate, but they want to submit some comments. How can they go about submitting comments?
So there's, if you go to the Commission's website, there's a whole page on the 405 Express toll lanes, and we've listed all the ways you can email us. There's a public inbox listed. There's actually a comment form on our website you can fill out, and you can call and you can send in writing. So all that information is posted on the website on the 405 Express toll lane rate setting page that you can find easily on our homepage.
We have another question. What measures will be taken if the project is not a success after 6 months test period? So maybe you refresh the audience that this is a 2-year cycle, but what will define this project if it's a success or not?
So as the legislature ought to move forward, they gave a number of parameters and objectives, mentioned the performance, the 45 miles an hour 9% of the time, looking at carpools and transit, making sure that after 2 years that it's operating in the black as we go forward, and we'll have those financial information. Key here is your ability for throughput and to compare it to the prior to afterwards, ability to move people up and down the corridor, its performance for traffic speeds and reliability, as well as then the financial components of that. And so we have very set elements that we're reporting on and preparing that, and we will have we'll have annual reports that will talk about the performance against those criteria.
We have a question. Why not try 2+ carpools first, and then if that doesn't work, switch to 3+ carpools for I405?
Well, I would propose that we already know that 2+ carpools don't work today from the standpoint of it's breaking down. We're not meeting performance standards. This is actually part of that solution set to make the facility work better. So if we continued what we have and put out tolling on top of that, we would not have success with that. So we are at a situation. It is interesting that 405 has much higher traffic, much higher demand, and that's why this 2+, 3+ question is in play. As you look down at 167, where we started with the hot lanes in 2008, it has less demand on that corridor in total, as well as less demand on the HOV lane. So we were able to keep 2+ and then be able to sell off the excess capacity. And in fact, we're running around 97% efficiency now in that lane during the peak 15 minutes. So it's working really well for us. The challenge is we have a different corridor. Also, I think it's important to recognize when 520 opens up to Seattle, it will be a 3+ HOV facility also, and it's been a 3+ facility on that shoulder carpool lane for years on that corridor. So you're going to start seeing more and more 3+, partly because of that population growth, travel growth that we have.
Good. Is this intended to be a trial for a potential expansion to other freeways and existing carpool lanes?
From the standpoint, this is looking at it, the way I like to frame it is the 167 hot lanes was a pilot. The legislature put it in place in 2008. and are really using the software vernacular. It's been version 1.0. 405 express lanes is really, we're taking lessons learned from 137, lessons learned from around the country. It's really version 2.0, and we want to see it being successful. We think that there is great potential to extend this down, as I mentioned, that 40-mile corridor, to continue it from the Renton area to Bellevue to make that corridor work. And the long-range plan for the Central Puget Sound area looking out to 2030 and 2040 says all of the HOV lanes will eventually come over to be express toll lanes as a concept. But that's in a long-range planning, land use, and kind of a jobs type of a scenario that they have in the region.
We also heard around the JBLM Joint Base Fort Lewis-McChord that the express toll lane may be a possible congestion management tool for that particular section of the larger I-5 corridor.
We have a question, someone who wants to join a single occupant vehicle pilot program. How can they do this before the fall?
I'm not sure I can answer that for you. Yeah. So wait until fall, and we'll have the program up and going. Next.
We have a commissioner asking the question here. If carpools at 2+ are not working today, why do traffic reports every morning announce that HOV lanes are moving much faster than GP lanes?
So similar to page 6, what we showed is that we do see that the HOV lanes do work better than general purpose lanes, but that's relative. So what we see here is that 60% of the time the HOV lanes are breaking down, whereas 90% of the time the general purpose lanes are breaking down. So you will see the duration of congestion is less, and the frequency is less in the HOV lane, showing that they do work. However, again, I've been on many transit trips coming up on 405, and you're stop and go in that HOV lane too. So it doesn't necessarily mean you're meeting your performance objective.
Amazingly enough, we've gone through all the questions, unless there's still more out there. Why not have an HOV meter bypass each of the ramps?
Actually, the ramp metering is based off of very much that same traffic flow principle. So in the 1980s, we started ramp metering on I-5. We've extended it to 405. You do see improvements with ramp metering. The challenge is you cannot control enough demand with just metering itself to keep the freeway always free-flowing, and you then face a situation where you get queuing onto local streets. The queue bypass for carpools and HOVs are on many of our ramps, and there's a case-by-case situation where they're evaluated, but I don't know, Kim, if the majority of them have HOV bypasses, but quite a few of them do.
Most of them do.
Yes.
Yeah.
The benefit here, just a side note, is that direct access in downtown Bellevue and Northeast 6 and that direct access in Kirkland at 128th will give great opportunity to get from what we call the urban centers directly into that express tolling without having to weave across. And so those will be a very nice situation there. And we also are seeing that around the country as a great opportunity to get in and out of express toll lanes. This is something San Diego has also done.
We have a question that someone's still a little bit confused on the toll prices for the 3 different zones. So could you cover that again on how the tolls will work for the 3 different toll zones?
Okay, so without having to bring up the presentation again, if you're up in the Linwood area and you're going to go down 405, you'll see a price that will take you to 522 at Bothell area. You'll see another price that will take you into the Kirkland area, and then you'll see a price taking you to the Bellevue area. The way that the graphic was shown, if you're running at minimum toll rates in 75 cents, all trips will be 75 cents, no matter if you're going a short trip or long trip. If you are in a situation that, page 16, if that's doable or not, but in the lower half, then it would show you, well, it might be $2 to get down to Bothell, $2.15 to get to 124th, and $2.35 to get Northeast 6th. What we'll be doing is when you enter the express toll lanes, we will know when you entered, and then we will monitor that trip. And when you get out, if you get out at 522, we know that trip is worth $2. If you get out around 124th, we know that trip was worth $2.15. And if you get all the way down to Bellevue, we'll know that trip is worth $2.35. The price you see when you get in is the price you'll be charged, even though 5 or 10 minutes later somebody comes in behind you at a different price, or when you're going down the facility, you see another price for another people when they enter. The price you see when you enter will be what you're charged. And so there will be situations where a particular segment will be probably the driver on our price. And again, that Bothell to Linwood will probably be the area that will be somewhat controlling on our price as we go. But that's going to depend on demand. As people come from Bellevue and they start splitting off as they start going to their destinations, then you'll start seeing some drop in traffic, and so the price will adjust again every 5 minutes.
That's good. We have multiple questions on this topic, and so I'm going to try to combine them into one question. You say that 2+ carpools won't work, but we are relying upon currently 1 carpool lane. So once we add another carpool lane and have 2 carpool lanes, how do we know that the 2+ won't work?
Right. So again, you think about the full 17 miles, the southern part will have 2 lanes, and that statement would be correct. It's that northerly section between Bothell and Linwood where you have that single HOV lane. We know it's breaking down now. That will be the controlling section. And so we need consistency up and down the corridor. So that's what's driving this part of this question going forward here. And so you need to understand there will be, again, 2 express lanes in the south, 1 express lane in the north. The north end will control.
Another question about the funds generated for this project. I heard the funds collected after the 2-year period will be spent on this corridor. What are the specific projects in the works for after that 2-year period?
So all the funds are generated by this facility even before 2 years. First you pay for your operating costs, and then anything net will go to the 405 fund. It's, like I said, held in the Treasury. It will accumulate. There will be interest that will accumulate on that as the state treasurer invests those dollars. The legislature appropriates dollars, and so they can then take those dollars and appropriate them accordingly. They are to be used for transportation. They're not for general fund. They are to be used for 405. They're not for I-90 or anything other type of facility. All I can do at this point is say that the House a couple of years ago passed a bill forward but did not go through the Senate that called for some of those funds to be spent on the Renton to Bellevue section. We know right now in the Senate Transportation Committee there's a proposal that also calls for some of those toll funds to be used potentially for the Renton to Bellevue section. So we're subject to the legislature going through a final package. They're debating that this session, and there are 3 projects across the state that they have identified that might use toll funds, and 405 is one of those.
We have a question on how do we arrive at this $10 maximum toll rate?
Maximum toll rate?
Yeah.
I just want to know if the commission want to respond to that, if you want me to.
Ann, I don't know if you want to take a stab at it.
Let's go back to that slide, which is a distribution of traffic.
Which one is that?
This one.
Number 6, maybe. That's the slide.
Okay.
And the traffic and revenue studies indicated that at the point at which the performance failed, a toll rate, a maximum toll rate, which could achieve greater throughput, would be in the range of $10 to $15 maximum. And the Commission tolling subcommittee is recommending that the Commission consider the $10 maximum, which is at the lower end of that range. We also know that that could present some operational challenges as the express toll lane becomes active, and that we will be monitoring the performance to see if that maximum toll rate is in fact working in the algorithm. But at the outset, it is set at a $10 maximum. But we know that it will be subject to close monitoring to ensure that it is working. And if it is not working, then we will undertake a public process again to relook at that maximum toll rate.
We have a question on the Linwood to Bellevue, Zone A through C. Will the express lanes from Bellevue to Renton also be 3+? And when will tolling begin on that section of highway?
Those are questions yet to be answered. We don't have funding to move forward on building the Renton to Bellevue section, so we can't answer the question as to when. The package that the legislature is considering right now is over a 16-year period. We don't know where 405 might fit into that time frame, so that's yet to be determined. And then we would be back with the commission and back in a process similar to this to then look at what the rates would be, what the exemptions would be, what the carpool policies would be for that section when that time comes. I would say, Kim, also just for people recognizing, the Bellevue to Renton is a pretty extensive project. I think it's over $1 billion with the interchange. How long would that take if you were to start construction right now?
So the project's going to take 3 years. Renton to Bellevue is going to take 3 years for design and all the environmental work, and then it's going to be about 4 years of construction. So the entire timeline is 7 years to get that project up and going from the time the legislature tells us to start.
It's a much-needed improvement, but it's also a major undertaking.
Are there going to be barriers preventing cars from entering and exiting these express toll lanes?
Yes, there will be. There's we call these the buffer zones. There will be very clear striping that this is an area that you are not to cross. It will vary in places, but roughly about 4 feet. It's going to be very obvious if you're crossing them. The State Patrol will enforce them. It's $124 for violating a traffic control device, such as a sign or striping. There will be very clear entrance and exit locations that will be in place with signs, and you then have a choice at those points whether you would see the price. Do you want to take the express toll lanes for that entrance? And then also in the express toll lanes, there will be signing that will tell you where you want to get out in order to meet your exit if you wanted to get to a particular exit off of 405.
I think they're asking if it was a physical barrier.
Yeah, we've considered different choices. Around the country, we have seen kind of raised pavement markings that may be only like a quarter or half inch, and we've seen people who put in kind of pylons, plastic pylons. We've seen people who put actually a concrete barrier up. There's choices for that. While it may not seem like it this year, we are a northern tier state that does have snow, believe it or not, and so being able to manage that and be able to get things moved. Also, we found that the pylons and things probably are not necessary, that they've had to put in place in California and others as we go. So that will be something that we'll be monitoring, but that will also be part of our enforcement program with the State Patrol to make sure everybody understands. And it will be very obvious whether you are crossing over a large gap there.
I thought there was one other factor, too, which was a safety factor, that a large physical barrier, in fact, slowed traffic.
Barriers have challenges from the standpoint as they are large, they can give you some friction on the side, but there's also end treatment. So when you have that crossover to get in, you have to put a what we call impact attenuator or something in there that can actually be a hazard into itself. And so we've elected to be able to have these designated exit and entrance points. And also I think our drivers here are very responsive to them, and I think we'll be able to understand them very clearly.
We have a couple of questions about the on-ramps and access to these lanes. So one question is, are the entry points to the HOV lanes, the express toll lanes, going to be near the on-ramps? And have you considered the impact that these on-ramps will have on the overall facility as there is a queue for these HOV on-ramps?
So there's two aspects to this, and again, Kim Henry may want to comment on it. When they laid out the entrance and exit points to the express toll lanes, they looked at the ramps and how people would weave, and so what the standard weaves would be to get across the lanes. Now remember, just like you do without right now the HOV lane, you are taking a choice to weave across to get to that HOV lane, and likewise to get out. So these crossover points have been very specifically located. It will be very beneficial, though, as I said, in the Kirkland and the Bellevue area, you can get directly to direct access ramp and not be able to weave at all, so that will take a lot of pressure off of that. But there will be monitoring of the express toll lanes. We'll be monitoring people who are moving into the express toll lanes. We'll be monitoring people coming out of it into the general purpose traffic. That all has to be taken into account to ensure that we're always operating 45 miles an hour or better.
In regards to merging, are you planning to include that in your public information campaign about safe ways and to be courteous and other ways to merge and weave?
We're going to be very clear in our materials in what we hand out and have maps on the web that will show people these are the entrance and exit points that you use to get to your destination if you want to get to Kirkland at a particular ramp or you want to get to another location. So we'll be able to kind of give individual guidance. I think on all things, driving the express toll lanes should be the common courtesies we have driving any facility that we have here in the state of Washington. So from that standpoint, I would encourage it, but we haven't actually pulled those specific words out, you might say, to put into our brochure, but we can review that.
Okay.
Was there any consideration to make one of the two new express toll lanes between Bellevue and 522 for buses only? And what are we doing to encourage people to stop driving as single occupancy?
So you come back to the between Bellevue and 522. It's interesting from the standpoint what we've seen across the country. I've been able to attend some situations where a professor from UCLA spoke about this. You have a single express lane or a single HOV lane, you're constrained by the slowest vehicle in that particular lane. If you have two of them, you then have passing opportunities. That actually makes it better for transit, better for everyone to be able to have the ability to move in and move out of the lane. So it partially gets to this question. What we're really saying is we would really like those two express toll lanes to work together in tandem and not have one designated for transit and the other one be priced, something that Commissioner Haley had mentioned earlier. As far as encouraging people to stop driving single-occupancy vehicles, demand management is a key part of this. Van pools, there are some people who would see that actually express toll lanes, and they saw this in San Diego where they took the HOV lanes and they started actually pricing them. And some people were concerned, well, people will just stop carpooling, we'll just start paying. They actually saw the opposite. There was a value all of a sudden put on driving and how long it took to get from point A to point B. They actually saw the HOV usage go up because they recognized that was a value. And also then people, when you go into 3+, when we went to 2+ and I-5, we actually saw about a 10% drop-off of our 3+. People just went off and didn't do it anymore. So you bring that back up, you might actually see more occupancy. So we'll be monitoring this program, as I mentioned, and doing annual reports on performance, and that will be a part of what we'll be doing is looking at person throughputs. We'll be looking at transfer performance. We'll be looking at van pool performance. The other example, while I have the opportunity, on 520 tolling, we took that facility, obviously we put tolling on it. We've seen over a 45 to 50% increase in transit usage. We've seen a 40 to 50% increase in van pool usage now on that corridor. So tolling does have an ability to actually, one, provide more reliability, faster trip, but it's also giving people options, and people are using those options.
Now, Craig, I know you answered this question earlier, but I think it's good to answer it again. If 2+ doesn't currently work at 45 miles per hour, why is 3+ going to start working once you add in FVs? And how are we going to continue to move cars at 45 miles per hour?
So it comes down to the demand that we have in the corridor. The 2+ are exceeding the ability of the lanes to manage, so we're actually breaking down. It's been about 6 out of 10 days there. So with the idea here, if you stay at 2+, it won't work. If you go to 3+, your transit, your van pools, and your car pools will have first priority. They get first access to the lane, and then you're selling off what the remaining capacity is available to you. And so as that 3+ grows over time, then you'll have a little bit less to sell. It'll probably be a little bit higher price as you do that, because there's less supply for the demand that's there. That's the difference. That's the key here. I do have a chart here. There's an appendix here, Noah, if you want to. Do you have this or not? You have page 42. Or no?
The unsold capacity?
This one. This is on the pack. I'm not sure if you have that.
I do.
This might be of interest to those asking the question. This is looking at March here of 2014 and in 167. So you see the purple line. That is the HOVs that are in 167. So I'm using this as an example. This says Tuesday through Thursday, so average of Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. The green area is what we're actually selling to the, we call it SOVs here, so we're single occupant vehicles. These are the people who are buying in, and you can see we're up, in this particular case, looks like 94% utilization of that lane around 6:30 in the morning. And then the blue is just unsold usage of the lane, because you're up here, the number of vehicles, that red line is kind of your capacity point. Well, at 5 o'clock in the morning, there's just not that much demand out there, so the toll rate's pretty low and not too many people are buying in. Around 6:30 in the morning, it's a lot of demand. People want to get to work, and people are willing to pay a price to do that, and we're pricing it to maximize that lane. And then we go into midday, again, you see the demand drops down, and we have unused capacity and unsold capacity, and that's fine. The key here, this is operating with 2+ HOV and 167. If you drew the same chart on 405, that red line would be cutting through that purple area. You would not have any more to sell. You would actually be over capacity, and you'd be broken down. Like going to 3+, you're then saying that purple line is car pools, transit, and van pools is making up the base, and then you're selling off the rest of it. And the key is, how do you make that whole lane as efficient as possible throughout the peak period? And that's what we found moves the most people, the most vehicles in the corridor. We compared it to general purpose traffic. We've compared it to different options. This became the most efficient way to operate the facility, and that's what we're after. Get everything you can out of every square foot that's out there, and not have that lost productivity that we see right now that happens with congestion.
What happens with the GP lanes on 167?
So what we've actually seen, the GP lanes have performed better on 167, even when traffic has grown overall. The economy is starting to pick up again. And so the GP lanes are actually seeing a little bit better speeds. The accident rates have really not varied. It's been safe as an operation through there. And so we're getting the most we can out of the lanes.
We have about 5 minutes left, so we'll try to continue to get through as many questions as we can. The next question is, what will the standard rate be considering our average daily traffic?
Well, we've modeled this a number of different ways. This is going to be interesting because the rate will be set on the number of users. I mean, it is going to be supply and demand in its purest sense. So the higher the demand, the higher that rate to get the 45 miles an hour. We'll be, tuning the algorithm, adjusting it to as we go forward. But it will be every 5 minutes, recalculating, looking at traffic through these segments as we go. We have modeled it to range, on average, 75 cents to $4. What we're seeing right now in 167, again, a little bit different demand down that corridor, is you're generally running around $2 average for saving 8 minutes, and so forth. So that's kind of the situation that you're seeing. The maximum on 167 is $9 set by the Transportation Commission. We have hit that a number of times, but it's not very frequent, and usually it's for like a 5-minute or a 10-minute period going down there. But again, the average on 167 has been about $2 for an 8-minute savings.
Great, great. Are there any plans for an HOV on-ramp from 522 to South I405?
There are plans for an on-ramp in that vicinity. That's part of our longer-range plan that is currently unfunded, and that discussion is not actually occurring today with the legislature, so that will be further out into the future. And maybe one of the plans that would be considered for any revenue that may result from the express toll lanes.
So just to clarify, so the barriers will be painted lines and not jersey barriers?
That's correct. If you've seen in some places around, we have kind of wide stripes. We've also have some raised components in it, so it kind of gives you a little bit of a lane feel, but that will be adjusted as we go. But that, you're right, that basically we look like is painted stripes. There will not be jersey barrier. There will not be pylons.
Okay. Can folks still report violators in the express toll lanes using the HERO program?
That's my understanding, yes.
How will the on-ramp meters be regulated for potential increases? What with additional two-person cars? Kirkland at 85th in particular has a very short entry ramp. How will these be monitored?
So all the information here regarding the ramp meters, the traffic cameras that we see out here, the monitoring that you see sometimes between black and red and green and yellow when you look at the web and maps, as well as the toll information, all will come to our traffic management center up to Shoreline. So the Department of Transportation has a way of monitoring all the traffic. This is all coordinated traffic management techniques, including the ramp metering components. So they'll be coordinated, and we do have abilities to make sure that short ramps don't impact the local streets regarding ramp metering, and so that will be part of that monitoring program. Our hope here, from what we've seen in forecasting, is that the lanes, again, will be more operationally more efficient, which should be able to help the general purpose traffic, which should be able to help the ramps also.
Craig, I think part of the question might be, is there a change in the individual ramp definition for the bypass?
Oh, did I miss that?
So the ramps at this time are not going to change.
No.
And that was a similar situation with 520. So the ramps here will remain at 2+, and so that ramp operation is going to remain unchanged. It's then just the decision to get into the express toll lanes or not.
Very good.
We have about 1 minute left, so we'll choose one more question and then have some closing comments. Yeah? Okay. How are we helping convince employers to participate in van pooling and transit?
Well, it's a good question. We actually work with commute trip reduction employers and areas where we're going to be out with them. We're working with Metro on their van pool program with this. I know when we started 520, I met with a number of employers who looked at maybe subsidizing or being able to work with tolling a little bit too. So there are choices, but we want to be able to specifically get out to employer sites. We will have mobile units from the Good to Go program that will go to employer sites and be able to sign individuals up, get them transponders and passes and the accounts. Again, we will work with those commute trip reduction folks to actually give them discounted passes. So those are all part of the programs that we have that are there, and we're trying to get the word out. And again, our education and marketing campaign is scheduled to start in April, and we will opening 405 in the fall. So we know that it will be very important to get the word out to everyone up and down the corridor and those that depend on 405 for their well-being and their daily lives, and so that's an important part of it.
Might just add one thing to that too, that from a land use perspective, that any new employer or occupying a new space with 100 employees or more required to file a transportation demand management plan with the state.
I think we are ready to wrap up and close. We appreciate your time and your participation. We have one more commissioner, Dan O'Neill, who joined us on the phone. So all of your comments were addressed, listened to, or answered by all of the commissioners who are here present tonight. The comments and the recorded questions will be on our website at wstc.wa.gov. If you have further comments, please contact us via our website. Or if you would like to join us again, we will be in Kirkland on February the 19th for an open house at 5:30 and a public hearing begin at 6 until 8 p.m. And we would look forward to seeing you then if you choose to join us at the Kirkland City Hall on February the 19th. Does the Commission have anything else that you would like to add? Craig Stone and Kim Henry, thank you very much for coming to this webinar. We hope that our participants found it useful and that it becomes a regular way of receiving public comment, input, and answering questions. So for all of us at the Washington State Transportation Commission in Olympia tonight at 8 p.m., thank you very much, and we are adjourned.